Hello and welcome. I'm so glad to see you here tonight for this record collection ASMR review. Tonight I have 4 different albums from 4 different eras, 4 different areas of the world that seem on the surface just very dissimilar and random. However, tonight I would like to explore some of the themes that bring them together. And also, as always, take a look at the artwork and the aesthetic that's so satisfying to examine vinyl albums. I've been collecting vinyl since I was in high school, and I collect for the sound, so you'll see that the records are not necessarily in perfect shape. I am not a purist. I love the artwork. I love the music. I love the nostalgic sound of vinyl. And that's what I look for. Maximum enjoyment. Let's get started, shall we? The first album is Bob Marley's Natty. This is from 1974, and it's a vintage copy. This was the first album that Bob Marley produced as Bob Marley and the Wailers, and it was kind of a key transitional album. It was the first, also the first Bob Marley album that featured the I3s, who are the female singers that probably you've come to know and love in many of the live tracks. Just became really integral to the sound from then on. And just looking at this, and just looking at the aesthetic, I love this close-up portrait with kind of a brightly colored background. I think that this is one of the albums where the artwork fits so well with the content of the music and the album itself. This close-up portrait, I think, just works perfectly with the fact that Natty Dread is really about, it touches on themes of identity and of not just personal significance, but cultural significance. And it's kind of, the themes are very genuine and kind of became a classic. And I think that very straightforward, honest, open-faced portrait that we see here, just kind of the artist meeting the viewer with no pretense, with no persona necessarily, just kind of intently looking into the eye of the viewer in that kind of pure connection. Works really well for the content of the album. I'll go ahead and show you the back as well. So I've noticed a theme with many of my favorite vintage albums, that on the front cover there will be a very composed, very staged, or you could say curated image of the artist or artists. And on the back, you kind of dive into this more candid action approach. So I can think of, I guess Pet Sounds is coming to mind. I think the same could be said for at least one Beatles album, although which one it is escaping me at the moment. But I think it's an interesting pattern that I've observed. So the songs on this album are Lively Up Yourself, No Woman, No Cry, Them Belly Full But We're Hungry, Rebel Music, So Jase, Natty Dread, Bend Down Low, Talkin' Blues, and Revolution. So you kind of go on this journey. The opening track is kind of a dancey, upbeat, life-affirming, just a happy song, and it dives into more of like some nostalgic vignettes from Trenchtown, and I love this album for many reasons. I love the rhythms. Just putting it on is an instant mood lifter. But also, I really appreciate this perspective of finding joy, finding love through hardship and through the kind of disappointments or griefs of life, and rising up and moving through it to this kind of almost spiritual place of triumph. For me, that's really what this album is all about. I'll show you the inside. So we have more images here of the band of Bob Marley, and the lyrics to the songs. I really like the color scheme. I think this is one of my favorite album cover and inside liner combos. So, as I mentioned, this album marked a major transition in Bob Marley's career. So now, let's move on to another type of transition. Next, we have Bob Dylan's classic album and a vintage record, Blood on the Tracks. Blood on the Tracks. So, in some ways, the aesthetic of this album cover reminds me of the one we just looked at, Natty Dread. Once again, you have this very kind of simple typography, the name of the artist and the album, and then a straightforward kind of plain portrait of the artist. Although in this case, the artist is not looking at us, not looking at the viewer, so you get the sense that maybe the exploration of whatever emotions are happening is more internal and maybe less kind of inviting us into it. It's like his own experience. And with the sunglasses as well, there's this other element of hiding perhaps, or reticence to kind of connect with the viewer. On the back is sort of an interesting drawing with some of the lyrics. You can see there's a Goodwill sticker on here still. I've not really been able to figure out this image, so if any of you has more information about it, I would very much appreciate hearing about it. I'll show show you inside cover. Very simple. It's very plain, gorgeous maroon color. Blood on the Tracks is another type of transition. It's also very personal. It's also something that explores identity, explores even more than identity, this kind of sweeping understanding of time and love, and kind of love leading to inevitable loss. It's pretty raw. The emotions in it are powerful. There are some songs that, truthfully, I have a hard time even listening to because they are just so intensely emotional. Like, I feel them in my chest. I feel the pain in my chest of just that intense emotion that comes across in the songs. Now, Bob Dylan has said that it's not an autobiographical album, but he did create it around the time that his marriage was ending, so take that how you will. Some of the most noteworthy songs on this album, at least to my mind, are Tangled Up in Blue, Simple Twist of Fate, Meet Me in the Morning, and Shelter from the Storm. I think Shelter from the Storm is perhaps my favorite. This idea of offering somebody some solace, not only from a storm, but just from the kind of thrashing change and inevitable difficulty of life, and how fleeting that can be. So it's beautifully emotional, beautifully raw. It combines different genres. So this is something that a couple of our other records today will have in common. This innovative blending of genres, in this case, folk rock and electric rock, and just such interesting songwriting. There are times when, and this is not always the case with Bob Dylan albums for me, but there are times when I almost get so caught up in the lyrics that it takes me out of the song. But I think that speaks to the power of the lyrics and just to the poetry that's really characteristic of Bob Dylan's work. It comes from, it seems like sometimes a deep autobiographical place, and other times a vision of a totally separate life from the artist's own. I think that's especially apparent in the song Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts. This album came out in 1975, 1 year later than Natty Dread, which you just looked at. So I highly recommend this album if you're going through a heartbreak or a transition. I feel very seen and understood when I'm experiencing some kind of sadness or heartbreak, and the music I'm listening to reflects that. So, what do you think? Alrighty, just switching gears quite a bit. We have another album that combines genres and combines kind of different aesthetics, and came about in a very different time and place than the other two, but it is connected to them in a certain way. It was inspired by Jamaican music, so we just talked about Natty Dread, Bob Marley, And that is Madness, One Step Beyond. One Step Beyond. This is a really fun album cover. It's kind of silly. I think that the songwriting on this album is witty and just fun, and it just perfectly reflects kind of that zany ska beat, ska vibe of the whole album. So this album combines not only the inspiration from Jamaican music, but British culture, British working class culture in the 1970s, early, it was not 1980 yet, but two-tone subculture. So the two-tone subculture arose in the late 70s through the early 80s. And you can see it's this black and white suited aesthetic. And on the back, you get a little bit more of that. The suited band members kind of doing different zany poses. And as silly as some of the songs are, like on this album, it's such a fabulous album. It's funny. When I was younger and just interested in ska, interested in reggae, and how the interplay between those genres, I liked this album okay, but I can't say I really deeply kind of connected to it or got into it. As an adult, years later, I vibe with it. I like it a lot. I like some of the kind of unusual instrumental interludes, and there are more heartfelt lyrics as well. So some of them are almost like musical jokes and a little bit silly, on purpose. And some are more genuine and really kind of speak to the emotional experience without getting sort of too earnest about it. So I will read you some of the songs on this album. Madness, One Step Beyond. Side 1, One Step Beyond. My Girl, Night Boat to Cairo. Believe Me, Land of Hope and Glory. The Prince. Side 2, In the Middle of the Night. Bed and Breakfast Man. Razorblade Alley. Swan Lake. Rocket in A Flat. Mummy's Boy. Madness. Chipmunks Argo. On the inside cover, as you can see, it's been taped together by a previous owner, which I kind of love. This little crinkly insert with these kind of relaxed images of the band members. One of my favorite things about it is just this pose on the front. It's iconic. I think that it stands out among album covers. I really like. Just kind of reminds me of like college kids, or just hanging out with your friends when you're really young, kind of horsing around and wrestling, being silly, and it's like, hey, let's all just line up and lean back, like in the exact same pose. Like you can almost, like the energy of it, you can almost imagine like what the conversation would have been like coming up with that pose. Great album, and I highly recommend it. Last of all, I have another record for you that combines different genres and, like some of the other albums, touches on themes about identity, about life transitions, and specifically breakups. This is one of my favorite albums ever. So we're jumping ahead a little bit. Madness One Step Beyond came out in 1979, whereas this album came out in 2015, and it's Tame Impala, Currents. I absolutely love this album artwork. It's unexpected. You don't really know what you're looking at. This beautiful, almost black sea pearl. Just making little ripples through whatever cosmic psychedelic substance this might be. And this album not only is about personal transitions thematically, but marked a transition for the artist from more psychedelic rock to that combining psychedelic rock with dance music, electronica. So it represents kind of in form and content, change, movement, evolution. I just really like the cover. Now you can see the back. It's relatively simple. What do you think? The songs on this album are Let It Happen, The Moment, Yes, I'm Changing, Eventually, Gossip, The Less I Know, The Better, Past Life, Disciples, Because I'm a Man, Reality in Motion, Love/Paranoia, New Person, Same Old Mistakes. And I'm looking on the inside. Oh, so gorgeous. It's really interesting. Artwork. And now this almost looks a little bit like an eye, but maybe not quite. It's open to interpretation. When this album first came out, I listened to it pretty much nonstop for an entire summer. And I still love it. It never gets old. I think it's one of those albums that works great as a single piece of art. Like, it's very cohesive and flows well from one song to the next. So another kind of interesting thing about this one is that it has 2 records. So it's very smooth paper. And the second one. Just a little peek. And I'll just gently put it back in. So, these themes are, each of these albums are sort of landmark albums in their genres. That's true for Natty with reggae, for Bob Dylan with folk rock music in the United States, and for Madness with the ska, two-tone ska music of the 1970s and early 80s, and Tame Impala in the psychedelic rock genre slash electronica slash dance music genre. This is a very influential album in the 2010s too. And what I like about each of these albums is they come from different artists from different continents. So from Australia to the UK to the US to Jamaica. Universal human themes, transition, identity, loss, new beginnings, evolution, transcending challenge, and raw emotion associated with all of those things, as well as approaching life with wit and heart. So, I deeply appreciate you joining me for this record video. I hope you have a peaceful evening, a beautiful rest. Until next time. Bye-bye.